The silence that followed was heavy. On the bridge of the unyielding resolve, the only sounds were the low hum of systems and the quick breathing of the crew. Captain Minsu's order to hold position felt like holding a breath. On his screen, the wreckage of the Courageous drifted, a brutal fact floating in the dark. Commander Park Ji-hyun was the first to move. She leaned over the shoulder of Sensor Officer Kim Tae-hyun. "Give me a full spectral analysis of that cloud. Everything. I want to know why their shot bent." Tae-hyun's fingers flew over his console. His face was pale but focused. "Running it now, Commander. The composition is normal. Hydrogen, helium, trace elements. But the energy signature inside it, it's wrong. It's reading like a solid." On the Imperial observation deck, Lord Exarch Velian composed himself. The destruction of the human ship was unfortunate, but it was a powerful message. He turned to Subcommander Kale. "They are holding position. They are stubborn. Send another transmission. Tell them this is their final chance to withdraw. We will not misfire again." Kale hesitated. "My lord, the sensor logs from that cloud. They show a minor spatial distortion. It was not in our environmental database for this sector." Should we what?" Velian interrupted. "Delay an annexation because of a cloud? Update the logs after the operation is complete. Send the message." The Imperial transmission came through. It was a cold, automated voice. "Terran vessels, you are trespassing in a sector claimed by the Galactic Mycelium Empire. Withdraw immediately. Any further resistance will be met with lethal force." Minsu listened, his face a stone. He did not reply. Instead, he spoke to his own crew. "Ji-hyun, what are our options?" Ji-hyun straightened up. "Fight? We lose." Their shields absorbed the backscatter from their own beam without a flicker. "Run? Our warp drives need 3 minutes to spin up from a cold stop. They can fire a dozen times in 3 minutes. So we hold," Minsu said softly. "We make them make the next move. We make them commit to this in front of whatever witnesses they have." He knew it was a thin plan. It was a soldier's plan, not a politician's. Meanwhile, Kim Tae-hyun was falling down a rabbit hole of data. The strange cloud was not alone. He pulled up the long-range sensor history of the sector. "Captain, Commander, look at this." He put a map on the main screen. It showed the Helios sector. Dozens of small, faint anomalies glowed a soft purple. They were scattered randomly, like stains on a dark cloth. "What am I looking at, Tae-hyun?" Minsu asked. "Background radiation pockets," Tae-hyun said. "But the radiation is all wrong. It's not hot. It's thick. It's like space itself has a different density in these spots. Our logs from our initial survey last year marked them as instrument ghosts. We ignored them." Ji-hyun zoomed in on one near the gas giant. "And the Imperial shot went through one." "Yes," Tae-hyun said. "And when their high-energy beam interacted with it, the readings spiked. For a moment, the thickness increased. Then it went back to normal." On the Imperial ship, Subcommander Kale was doing his own quiet research. He bypassed the main log database and went into the old, raw exploration archives. The Empire had scanned this sector decades ago, before it was marked for annexation. He found a fragmented report. The title read, "Helios Sector, Intermittent Spatial Anomalies, Non-Threatening." He opened it. The scientist's notes were brief. "Localized zones exhibit minor gravitational lensing and energy refraction. No pattern. No intelligent cause. Hypothesis: residual effects from ancient dark matter decay. No action required." Kale felt a sliver of doubt. Non-threatening was a label given by a scientist who was not being shot at. He looked at Velian, who was watching the human armada with impatience. "My lord," Kale began carefully, "the old deep scan archives mention the spatial anomalies here. They caused sensor refraction." Velian did not look away from the view. "And were they deemed a hazard to navigation or operations?" The report said, "No, my lord." "Then they are not relevant," Velian stated. He pointed at the human fleet. "That is relevant. Their defiance is a sickness. If a lesser species does not fear you, others may get similar ideas. The sickness must be burned away. Back on the human ship, Ji-hyun had a terrible thought. Taehyun, what happens if a much larger energy signature interacts with one of these anomalies? What if our entire fleet's engine signature, or a full-power Imperial weapon, hits one? Taehyun ran a quick simulation. The results were chaotic. The model couldn't predict the outcome. The energy might scatter. It might amplify. It might do something else entirely. It's unknown, Commander. The system is too chaotic. Min-soo made a decision. Send a tight beam broadcast to the Empire. Not on their official channel. Use a basic frequency. Maybe their version of a backdoor. What do we say? Ji-hyun asked. We tell them about the anomalies. We give them the data. We propose a mutual withdrawal to study the problem. It was a desperate move. It admitted weakness. But it was the only move left that wasn't suicide or slaughter. The message, containing Kim Tae-hyun's strange sensor data, was sent. It was a simple packet of numbers and readings. On the Imperial deck, a junior officer received it. Lord Exarch, an irregular transmission from the human flagship. It is raw sensor data. Velian finally turned. Annoyed. More begging? No, my lord. It is environmental data, marking certain zones of space as potentially unstable. Velian walked over and glanced at the data. He saw the humans' primitive readings of the anomalies. To him, it looked like noise. It looked like a trick. A desperate delay tactic from a species that knew it was outclassed. He smiled. A thin, cold smile. They see our power. Now they invent ghosts in the dark to scare us away. They think we are children afraid of shadows. He looked at Kale. This proves their weakness. They are trying to confuse us. It will not work. He returned to his position. Order the fleet to target the human flagship. A clean, disabling strike to their engine block. No more warnings. Let's end this farce. The Imperial weapons began to glow again. A single, powerful cannon aimed directly at the heart of the unyielding resolve. Min-soo saw the energy build up on his screen. Their message had failed. He closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, they were clear. All ships. This is the captain. Execute emergency warp. Get out in whatever order you can. Now. It was the order to run. But it was 3 minutes too late. And as 100 human engines flared to life, pouring massive energy into the void, and as the Imperial weapon charged to fire, the strange, thick patches of space around them began to stir. On the bridge of the unyielding resolve, time seemed to stretch. The order to run had been given, but everyone knew the math. 3 minutes was a lifetime. The Imperial weapon glowed like a cruel green star on the main screen. A final period to their story. Sensor Officer Kim Tae-hyun stared at his own screen, not at the weapon. He had split his display. One side showed the charging Imperial cannon. The other showed a real-time map of the spatial anomalies. As the human engines powered up and the Imperial gun reached its peak, the anomalies began to change. Captain, Taehyun's voice cracked. The anomalies. They're reacting. The energy signatures are spiking. A low, shuddering vibration passed through the ship. It was not from their own engines. Came from outside. It passed through the hull like a deep, terrible sound no one could hear. On the Imperial observation deck, Lord Exarch Velian watched with cold approval. The human ships were scrambling, their engines flaring bright like panicked fireflies. It was an ugly, chaotic display. His own weapon was a model of perfect, controlled power. Then, his own sensor officer spoke, voice tight. Lord Exarch, we are detecting massive gravitational fluctuations. Source is diffuse. It is all around us. Focus on the target, Velian commanded. Waving a hand. Subcommander Kale was not looking at the human fleet. He was watching the deep space scans. The readings were impossible. Patches of space were no longer empty. They were becoming solid. My lord, the human data. They were not lying. The anomalies are active. It was too late. The Imperial weapon fired. The beam of concentrated energy, designed to cripple a ship's core, lanced out across the void. At the same moment, the full power of the human armada's old-fashioned fusion engines washed over the sector. The two massive energy signatures did not hit each other. Instead, they poured into the nearest and largest spatial anomaly, a patch of space that hung between the two fleets like a hidden reef. The anomaly did not refract the energy this time. It absorbed it, and then it woke up. Space itself tore.it was not an explosion. There was no light at first. It was a rip in the fabric of reality, a wound that bled darkness. From the tear, something emerged. It had no shape that made sense to the eye. It was a shifting mass, darker than the space around it, outlined only because it blotted out the stars behind it. It seemed to be made of crushed rock, frozen gas, and pure shadow, all churning together. Gravitational waves, visible as ripples in the light, pulsed from it. The Imperial beam vanished into the thing. The energy from the human engines was swallowed. For a second, there was a terrible silence. Then the entity, the Reaver, moved. It did not turn. It simply was in a new place, as if the space between here and there meant nothing. It passed through the edge of the Imperial formation. A mycelium cruiser, a beautiful ship shaped like a curling leaf, was there one moment. The next, it was gone. It did not explode. It was crushed and unraveled into a stream of glittering fragments, as if pulled apart by invisible hands. The shields did not flash. They simply ceased to be. Chaos erupted. On the human bridge, alarms screamed. What was that? Ji-hyun yelled, her tactical screen flooding with panic signals. Taehyun was reading the data, his face white with horror. It's a gravitational singularity event, but it's alive. It's feeding on the energy. Our engines, their weapons. We woke it up. Another tear opened closer to the human fleet. A second dark form oozed into existence. This one lashed out. A tendril of distorted space, like a whip made of broken physics, flickered across the flank of a Terran destroyer, the Dauntless. The ship's armored hull offered no more resistance than wet paper. A kilometer-long gash opened, spilling everything inside into the vacuum. Captain Min-soo gripped his chair. This was no enemy you could fight. This was a force of nature. All ships, cease engine burn. Cut all power except life support. Do it now. It was a desperate gamble. If the things fed on energy, maybe they could hide. But the order came too late for many. The human armada was lit up like a beacon, and the Reavers were hungry on the Imperial side. Velian stood frozen. His perfect annexation had become a nightmare. Another one of his ships, a colonizer, was caught in the path of the first Reaver. It was slowly, silently compressed into a ball of mangled organic metal no bigger than a shuttle. Return fire, Velian screamed, his voice breaking. Destroy those things. My lord, our weapons have no effect, Kale shouted back. The energy is being absorbed. It makes them stronger. The Imperial fleet, trained for elegant warfare, fired everything. Beams of green energy, plasma orbs, kinetic projectiles. They lit up the dark, a magnificent display of power. Each shot flew into the shifting dark forms of the Reavers and disappeared. With each absorbed blast, the Reavers seemed to grow larger, more defined, and more furious. The Reavers turned their attention fully on the source of the delicious, powerful energy. The Imperial fleet. A Reaver enveloped a mycelium battleship. The ship's graceful form twisted and cracked, its organic light snuffing out as it was pulled into the dark mass and ground into nothing. Min-soo watched the Imperial fleet being dismantled. There was no victory in it, only a vast, consuming dread. His own ships were dying too, caught in the crossfire or hunted as smaller sources of heat and power. The unyielding resolve shuddered violently as a gravitational wave from a distant Reaver passed through it. Support beams groaned. Damage to decks 4 and 7. Hull integrity failing on the port side, Ji-hyun reported, her voice steady but loud. Kim Taehyun looked up from his screen. His eyes were wide with a realization more frightening than fear. Captain, they're not targeting us. Not like they're targeting the Empire. We're campfires. The Imperial fleet. It's a bonfire. We just lit the match. The truth was a cold stone in Minsu's gut. They hadn't started a war. They had stumbled into a nest of sleeping vipers, and the Empire's arrogance had kicked it. Now, the vipers were biting everyone. He saw a Terran frigate, the Swift, try to warp out. Its engines flared bright blue. A Reaver, drawn to the energy spike, was on it in an instant. The Swift was gone before the warp field could form. "Cancel the warp order," Minsu said, his voice hollow. "All power to structural integrity. We ride out the storm, or we die in the quiet." He looked at the main screen. The beautiful, powerful Imperial fleet was being erased from the universe, ship by ship. The Empire watched in dread, and so did he. They were all just witnesses to an annihilation they had foolishly caused. The storm of silent destruction raged. The Reavers moved through the fleets like wolves in a field of sheep. They did not attack with strategy or anger. They simply existed where the energy was richest, and their existence meant ruin. On the Imperial observation deck, Lord Exarch Velian could only watch. The screen showed the dying pulses of his mighty ships. The heart of the mycelium, the flagship of his escort, was trying to retreat. Its graceful engines glowed with a desperate green light. A Reaver, a shifting blot of dark matter and star ash, slid across its path. The flagship did not explode, came apart. Its organic hull split along hidden seams. Its interior, glowing with soft bioluminescence, was exposed and then snuffed out in an instant. The beautiful ship became just more frozen dust. Velian's hands gripped the rail in front of him. His knuckles were white. This was not a defeat. It was an impossibility. It was not in the logs. His mind could not accept it. Subcommander Kale acted. "All remaining ships, cut primary power. Go to emergency life support only. Do not fire weapons. I repeat, do not fire." A few of the surviving captains heard him and obeyed. Their ships went dark. The soft internal lights vanished. They became cold, silent stones in the river of chaos. The Reavers nearby slowed their movements. They drifted past these dark ships, their attention drawn to the few Imperial vessels still panicking and firing their weapons. Each shot made the Reavers stronger. Each burst of engine power was like a ringing bell for them. On the bridge of the unyielding resolve, Minsu saw the same thing. His gamble was the only option left. Confirm order. All non-essential systems off. Go dark. The hum of the ship's engines died. The main lights went out, replaced by the dim red glow of emergency strips. The air grew still. The only sounds were the crew's breathing and the occasional groan of the ship's frame. On the main screen, powered by a tiny backup battery, they watched the end. A Reaver passed close to them. It was like watching a mountain made of shadow and crushed galaxies drift by the window. It blotted out the stars. Inside its form, they could see brief flashes, the last energy of the ships it had consumed. It was a graveyard, moving. Commander Park Ji-hyun whispered, her eyes fixed on the sight. "What are they?" Kim Tae-hyun worked at a low-powered tablet. His voice was flat with shock. "I think they are a natural cycle, like a tide. They sleep in those anomalies. They are made of the stuff left over from dead stars. High-energy signatures wake them up. We didn't find them in our logs because they aren't alive. They aren't machines. They are a weather pattern. And we flew into the middle of it with a lightning rod." The truth settled over the bridge. They had not been attacked by a monster. They had ignorantly walked into a tornado, and they had led the Empire in with them. A new sound started. A low, deep vibration that came through the hull. It was not from a Reaver. It was from their own ship. "Report," Minsu said quietly. Ji-hyun checked a faint screen. "The port engine reactor. It's damaged from the gravitational shear. It's in a forced cold shutdown, but the core is unstable. It's going to breach. It will release a massive energy spike." Minsu closed his eyes. A cold, hard lump formed in his throat. An engine breach would light them up like a signal flare in the dark. Every Reaver in the sector would come. "How long?" he asked. "Maybe 5 minutes. Maybe less." There were no good choices left. They could not move. They could not fix it. To stay was to die when the reactor blew. taking any nearby ship with them. To try and move the dying ship away would also use energy and draw attention. Min-soo looked around his bridge. At Ji-hyun, his steady right hand. At young Tae-hyun, who had seen the truth first. At the others, their faces pale in the red light. They were all waiting for him to have an idea. He had none. Then Kim Tae-hyun spoke up. His voice was small but clear. "Captain, the reactor, it will release all its energy at once, right? In one big pulse." "Yes," Min-soo said. What if we aim it?" Tae-hyun continued. He turned his tablet. On it was a simple diagram. "We can't stop the breach, but we could use the emergency maneuvering thrusters. The chemical ones. They are tiny. Maybe their signal won't be seen. We could turn the ship, point the engine port away from our remaining fleet, and toward the largest concentration of Imperial ships." The room went still. Ji-hyun understood first. "Use our death as a weapon. Lure the Reavers toward the Empire's remaining power sources. Give our other ships a chance to stay dark and maybe survive." It was brutal. It was terrible. It was also the only tactical move left on the board. Min-soo felt the weight of the decision. He was about to use his ship's destruction to kill others. But the others were the ones who had fired first. The ones whose arrogance had guaranteed this disaster. And it would save some of his people. He straightened in his chair. "Do it. Plot the thruster burn. Minimum power. Just enough to swing our tail toward the Imperial cluster." On the Imperial deck, Velian saw the slight movement of the human flagship. It was turning slowly. A tiny puff of gas flared from its side. "What is that dying ship doing?" he muttered, his voice hollow. Kale saw it on the tactical map. He saw the facing of the ship change. He saw the unstable energy reading from its port engine, growing like a poisonous flower. And he saw where the ship was now pointing. A cold understanding washed over him. "They are not just dying," Kale said, horror in his voice. "They are aiming." The chemical thrusters on the unyielding Resolve fired in small, controlled puffs. In the grand theater of destruction around them, the maneuver was tiny. A mere sigh. The massive, wounded ship began a slow turn. It was the movement of a dying animal, positioning itself for one last act on the bridge. The air was cold and still. Captain Min-soo watched the main screen. It showed the cluster of Imperial ships that had survived the initial onslaught by going dark. They were cold and silent, hoping to be invisible. His ship was pointing its failing engine, a soon-to-be bomb, right at them. "Thruster burn complete," Ji-hyun reported, her voice a soft monotone. "We are on final alignment. Reactor breach in approximately 2 minutes." Min-soo nodded. He opened a channel to the few Terran ships that still answered. "All remaining units. This is the Resolve. When you see the flash, go to 0 emissions. Do not move. Do not signal. Be a rock. That is your final order. Good luck." He closed the channel. There was nothing else to say. On the Imperial observation deck, Subcommander Kale understood the human captain's plan with perfect, terrible clarity. The unstable human reactor was a beacon about to ignite. It would call every Reaver to its location. And the humans had pointed it at them. "Lord Exarch," Kale said, urgency cutting through his shock. "The human ship, its core is going critical. They have turned it toward us. The energy pulse will draw the entities here." Velian stared at the screen. He saw the data now. The rising energy signature from the human vessel. The positioning. It was not a random act of a crippled ship. It was a final, spiteful arrow shot from a defeated foe. "They are barbarians," Velian whispered, not with anger, but with a kind of sick awe. "Even in death, they seek to harm. We must move our ships," Kale insisted. "We must scatter." "And use our engines?" Velian asked, his eyes wide. "You saw what happens. Power is death. Movement is death." He was trapped by his own understanding. The human move was brutal and brilliant. It was a checkmate with a corpse. "Then we must warn the others to shield against the pulse." Kale was already working, sending a tight beam signal to the nearest Imperial cruiser. "Prepare for an energy surge." Do not respond with power. Brace only. But it was a fragile hope. The Reavers were not drawn just to light. They were drawn to the discharge, the release. A shield required power. A brace required systems to be online. It was a terrible gamble. On the human bridge, the final minute counted down in their minds. Kim Tae-hyun watched his scanner, now running on the last of its backup power. He saw the Reavers. They moved in slow, unpredictable patterns. But they were all slowly turning. Like sharks catching the first scent of blood in the water, they were sensing the building storm in the unyielding Resolve's engine room. They're already coming, Tae-hyun said softly. The ship shuddered again. A deep, metallic groan echoed from the port side. A warning light flashed on Ji-hyun's panel and then went dark, its power source dead. That's it, Ji-hyun said. Containment is failing. Any second now. Captain Min-soo looked at her, then at Tae-hyun, and finally around at the dim bridge. It has been an honor, he said, his voice firm and clear. You have done your duty. There is no more to do. They waited. The only sound was the faint hiss of air in the vents. The end did not come with a roar, but with a shriek from the port engine of the unyielding Resolve. A spear of blinding white energy erupted. It was not a clean explosion. It was the violent, uncontrolled death of a star, contained for a moment and then set free. The energy tore through the ship's hull, vaporizing metal and composite. It lit up the dark sector with the intensity of a small sun. For 1 second, the terrible light washed over everything. It illuminated the frozen wreckage, the drifting bodies, the elegant, dark forms of the Reavers, and the cold, silent Imperial ships. Then, the soundless blast wave of pure radiation and particles HIT washed over the nearest Imperial cruiser, the Silent Grace. The ship's organic hull, designed to absorb directed energy, could not handle this raw, chaotic outburst. The outer layer boiled away. The ship was pushed sideways, tumbling out of formation. Its systems, shocked and damaged, automatically tried to correct. Stabilizer thrusters fired. Internal lights flickered back on. It was a tiny spark. But in the absolute dark, it was a beacon. Every Reaver in the vicinity stopped its drifting. In unison, they turned toward the Silent Grace. Then they moved. Space seemed to bend as they surged toward the new source of energy, drawn to it like iron to a magnet. The Silent Grace was enveloped in seconds. It vanished, adding its energy to the dark mass that consumed it. But the pulse from the human ship had done more. It had energized the very space around the Imperial fleet. It was like throwing a rock into a still pond. The ripples disturbed the other anomalies. 2 more Reavers began to form directly within the Imperial formation, birthed by the violent energy wash. Panic is a form of energy, too. On the Imperial ships, discipline broke. One captain, seeing the monsters appear within his own fleet, tried to run. His engines flared to life. He was gone before he traveled a kilometer, pulled into a waking nightmare. Another ship fired its weapons at a forming Reaver, desperate to destroy it before it fully woke. The beams fed it, making it solid and whole faster. The Empire's orderly retreat became a feeding ground. Lord Exarch Velian watched his remaining power die, ship by ship, on his screen. The dread was no longer something he watched. It was inside him, cold and heavy. He had come to plant a flag. He had instead watered a graveyard with his fleet. And the humans, the insignificant species not in the logs, had handed him the shovel. On the screen, the last light from the shattered human flagship faded. Where the unyielding Resolve had been, there was only expanding debris and an angry, fading star of radiation. The humans were gone. But their final act was still playing out. As the Empire's remaining ships were hunted down in the dark they had so carelessly disturbed. The feeding did not last long. The Reavers, now fully awake and energized, were efficient. They were a storm that passed through the remaining Imperial ships and then began to slow, their hunger satisfied by the feast of power. On the bridge of the last functional Imperial command ship, the silence was absolute. Lord Exarch Velian stood at the viewport, but he saw nothing. His eyes were blank. The screens behind him showed the final, grim tally of the proud observation and colonizer fleet, only 3 ships remained. They were crippled, their beautiful organic hulls cracked and leaking atmosphere. They were dark, running on the barest trickle of backup power. Subcommander Kale gave the orders now. His voice was rough but steady. Keep all systems at minimum. No signals. Life support only for command crew. Everyone else to stasis pods now. He looked at Velian's back. The Lord Exarch was broken. The reality of the logs being wrong, of the universe being so much more dangerous than his empire believed, had shattered his mind. Kale turned to the sensor display. Of the human armada there were faint, scattered signals. A few life pods. The cold, dead husks of ships that had been ripped open but not fully consumed. One small corvette, the Morning Star, appeared to be intact. It was dark and drifting like a tombstone. The Reavers drifted past it now, ignoring the cold rock. The storm was ending. The Reavers, their cycle of waking complete, were returning to their dormant state. They did not leave. They simply unfolded. The dark, churning masses grew diffuse. They lost their terrible shapes and became again like faint, shimmering patches of distorted space. The anomalies. They settled back into the void, invisible once more except as a slight ripple on a deep-range scan. The Helios sector was quiet again. But it was not the quiet of emptiness Velian had seen before. It was the quiet of a field after a battle, littered with the dead. Among the wreckage, a single Terran life pod blinked a weak, repeating signal. It was an automated distress beacon, running on a tiny battery. Kale saw it on his screen. A single, pulsing light in the graveyard. Part of him, the Imperial officer, said to leave it. They had to save themselves. But a deeper part, the part that had seen the human captain make his final, terrible choice, knew he could not. Navigation, Kale said quietly. Plot a minimal thrust course to intercept that Terran beacon. Use the gravity of the gas giant to slingshot us. Engines for 1 5-second burn only. Subcommander, is that wise? The navigation officer asked, his face pale. It is necessary, Kale said. He did not explain further. The damaged Imperial ship, moving slower than a drifting asteroid, used the barest whisper of its thrusters to adjust course. Took hours. During that time, Kale had the crew carefully collect all sensor data from the event. The birth of the Reavers, their behavior, the energy signatures. It was the most valuable and terrible information in the galaxy. Finally, they reached the life pod. It was a simple metal sphere, scarred and frozen. Using manual controls, Kale guided a robotic arm to capture it and bring it into the damaged shuttle bay. The bay was depressurized and dark. Kale put on a survival suit and went in alone. He opened the pod's hatch. Inside, curled in the fetal position, was Commander Park Ji-hyun. Her face was pale, her lips blue from the cold. A thin film of frost coated her flight suit. She was unconscious, but the pod's med reader showed a faint, slow heartbeat. She had been the only one on her escape pod. She must have launched just seconds before the reactor breach. Kale carefully detached her from the pod systems and lifted her. She was light as a bird. He carried her back to the Imperial ship's infirmary, where the medbots, powered by a separate battery, hummed to life. As he watched the bots work, he thought of his own crew, dead in the dark. He thought of the human crew also dead. He thought of the arrogant, foolish belief that because something was not in their logs, it was not real. Ji-hyun's eyes fluttered open. She saw the unfamiliar, organic-looking ceiling. She saw the strange, elegant form of an Imperial medbot. And she saw Subcommander Kale, his face etched with exhaustion and grief. For a moment, panic filled her eyes. Her hand twitched, searching for a weapon that was not there. Kale raised his empty hands, palms out. A universal gesture. He spoke slowly, knowing she might not understand his language. The fight is over. You are safe. For now. Ji-hyun stared at him. Her breathing was quick. She understood the tone, if not the words. She looked past him, through the open door of the infirmary, to the damaged corridor beyond. She saw the state of his ship. She saw the truth. The fight was indeed over. Everyone had lost. She closed her eyes again, not in unconsciousness, but in a weary acceptance of a terrible truth. A single tear escaped, tracing a path through the grime on her cheek. It was not just for her ship or her captain or her crew. It was for the sheer, stupid waste of it all. Cale watched her. He did not see an enemy. He saw the only other survivor of a shipwreck. They were not on Imperial or Terran ships anymore. They were on a raft in a sea of ghosts, and the ghosts were now in the logs. He turned and left the infirmary. He walked back to the silent command deck. Lord Exarch Velian was still standing by the viewport, a statue of dread. Cale did not speak to him. He went to the communication console. He prepared a data burst containing all the records of the annihilation. It would be sent to the Empire when they were far enough away to risk a single, powerful transmission. The title of his report was simple. They weren't in our logs. He knew it would change nothing for the dead. But perhaps, for those who came next, it would be a warning. The galaxy was not a garden to be claimed. It was a forest, dark and deep, and there were things in it that did not care about empires. The 3 surviving Imperial ships were like wounded animals crawling away from a forest fire. They moved on the barest trickle of power, using the gravity of stars to pull them along. It was a slow, cold journey back toward the edges of Empire space. Inside, the crews were silent. The shock was too deep for words. On the lead ship, Commander Park Ji-hyun recovered in the infirmary. She sat on the edge of a bed that seemed grown from smooth, pale wood. A mycelium medbot had healed her minor injuries, but it could do nothing for the hollow feeling inside her. Subcommander Cale visited her often. At first, they could not speak. He used a translation device and they exchanged only basic needs. One day, he brought a datapad. On it was the complete sensor record from his ship. He showed her the final moments of the unyielding resolve. The brilliant, terrible flash of the reactor breach. The way her ship's death had drawn the Reavers toward the Imperial fleet. He showed her Captain Minsu's final maneuver, the tiny thruster burns. Ji-hyun watched it all with dry eyes. When it was done, she looked at Cale. He gave them a target, she said, her voice flat, so others might live. Cale nodded. It was a good tactic. A terrible one, but good. He paused. My people would not have done it. We would have tried to die beautifully, perfectly. It would have meant nothing. That was the first real understanding between them. Weeks passed. The ships finally reached a quiet, empty system just outside the Empire's mapped territory. Here they stopped. They could not go home yet. They had to decide what to say. Lord Exarch Velian never left his quarters. He sat in the dark, staring at the wall. The dread he had watched had moved inside him and settled there forever. The Empire's logs, the foundation of his life and power, were wrong. If they could be wrong about this, they could be wrong about anything. His universe had become a terrifying, unpredictable place. He was a shell. Cale, now in command, called a meeting. It was held in a small room. Ji-hyun was there, standing to one side. The few remaining Imperial officers sat, their faces tired. We must send a report, an officer said. The High Command will be waiting. What do we tell them? Asked another. That we were destroyed by a weather pattern? They will think we are mad or cowards. Cale stood. He pointed to the data pad in the center of the table. We tell them the truth, the complete truth. We show them the sensor logs. We show them the human data that warned of the anomalies. We show them Lord Exarch Velian ignoring it. We show them the human armada being destroyed. We show them our own fleet being annihilated. We show them the Reavers. There was a long silence. They will not like it, the first officer said. It makes us look weak. It makes the logs look weak. The logs are weak, Ji-hyun said. Everyone turned to look at her. She spoke slowly, using the translator. Your logs did not save you. Our defiance did not save us. We both believed in stories. Your story was that you knew everything. Our story was that we could stand up to anything. Both stories were wrong. The only thing that was real was the dying. Her words hung in the air. No one could argue. Cale finally nodded. We send the full record, and with it we send a recommendation. The Helios sector is to be marked with the highest danger warning. No travel. No expansion. It is a tomb, and the things that guard it are not enemies. They are like lightning. You do not fight lightning. You avoid it. The officers agreed. It was the only sensible choice. The data burst was prepared. Contained thousands of hours of records. The final, edited message from Subcommander Kale was brief. To the High Command of the Mycelium Empire, the annexed Helios sector is not viable. It is the home of a non-sentient cosmological hazard. The attached logs detail the loss of the entire annexation fleet and the complete destruction of the local Terran defense forces. The hazard is triggered by high-energy emissions. Our actions and the Terran presence triggered it. This is not a defeat in war. It is a catastrophe of ignorance. The species known as Terrans are to be relogged. They are not a Tier 3 threat. They are a warning. They prove that what is not in our logs can still kill us. He sent the message. It would take months to reach its destination with nothing left to do. The little convoy of broken ships began the long, final journey home. Ji-Hyun often stood in the observation deck, looking out at the stars. Kale found her there one day. "What will you do when we reach your empire?" she asked. "I will give my report. They may listen. They may not. But I have done my duty," he said. He looked at her. "And you?" She smiled a little, a sad twist of her lips. "I am a prisoner?" "You are a guest," Kale said. "A witness. The only other witness who understands. You can stay under our protection. Or, when we pass near a neutral zone, we can give you a shuttle. You can try to find your people." Ji-Hyun thought about it. She thought of Min-Soo and Taehyun and all the others. Going home to tell that story held no appeal. Staying in the empire that caused it felt like a betrayal. But she was alive and they were not. That had to mean something. "I will stay for now," she said. "Someone has to make sure your people remember what really happened. Not the story of a battle, but the story of a mistake." Kale nodded. It was fair. As the ship moved on, both of them looked back, not with instruments, but in their minds. They saw the silent sector where two proud fleets had died. Not for glory, not for land, but because they had made too much noise in a quiet, dangerous universe. The Empire would soon watch the logs of the annihilation in dread. And perhaps, just perhaps, that dread would teach them to be quiet, too. The void of the Helios sector was cold, dark, and perfect. To Lord Exarch Velian of the Galactic Mycelium Empire, it looked like a clean slate. His observation deck was quiet. The only light came from the soft glow of the control panels and the distant stars. Through the wide window, he could see the shapes of the Imperial colonizer ships. They moved slowly and gracefully. They looked like seeds ready to be planted in new soil. "The final scans are complete, Lord Exarch," said Subcommander Kale. He stood a respectful distance behind his superior. "No sentient life above microbial level. No energy signatures. The sector is empty." Velian allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. "Empty is good. Empty is orderly. It means our logs are correct." The Empire's logs were the greatest library of knowledge in known space. If a species or a threat was not in the logs, it was not a threat. It was simple. The colonizers report they are ready to begin seeding the mycelium network on the third planet. Kale added. "Proceed," Velian said. He turned his gaze to the star field. This was the easy, calm work of expansion. It was his reward for a long career. He watched as the colonizer ships, beautiful vessels shaped like twisted vines, began to glow with a soft green light. They were about to start their work. Then, a sharp sound broke the silence. A high-pitched alarm from the sensor station. Velian's smile vanished. "Report." The sensor officer's voice was confused. "Multiple warp signatures, Lord Exarch, emerging from the blind zone near the system's gas giant. They were hiding there." "Classification?" Velian asked, his voice tight. A moment of typing. "Ships are blocky. Design is primitive. They use metal hulls and chemical propulsion for minor movements. Energy profiles are low. They match the Terran species, Premicelium, Tier 3. Velian relaxed. Tier 3. A species that had not even discovered bioorganic technology. They still lived inside metal boxes and used fire to move through space. They were children. Annoying, but not dangerous. "Show me," he ordered. The main screen lit up. A fleet of human ships had appeared. They were ugly things. All hard angles and gray steel. They formed up in a rough defensive wall. Their largest ship was in the center. Its name, written in the human script, translated to Unyielding Resolve. That on the bridge of the Unyielding Resolve, Captain Lee Min-soo felt a familiar weight in his stomach. The Imperial ships on his screen were unlike anything human engineers could build. They looked grown, not made. They shimmered with a light that seemed alive. "They're beautiful," whispered Sensor Officer Kim Tae-hyun from his station. He was young, his eyes wide. "They're pointing every weapon they have at us, Tae-hyun," said Commander Park Ji-hyun. She stood beside Min-soo's chair. Her face was calm, but her eyes were sharp, scanning the data. "Their energy output is off the charts. Our shields might as well be paper." "Our orders are simple," Min-soo said, mostly to himself. "Show the flag. Protest the annexation of a system we surveyed. Do not, under any circumstances, fire first." He sighed. The politicians back home thought a show of force would make the advanced empire talk. Min-soo knew better. You did not wave a stick at a god. Back on the Imperial ship, Velian shook his head. "Terrans. They have a few colonies on the fringe. They are not in our expansion logs for this sector. They have no claim." "They are transmitting," Kale said. A human face appeared on a side screen. "Captain Min-soo, Galactic Mycelium Empire vessels. This is Captain Lee Min-soo of the Terran Defense Flotilla. You are entering a system under Terran survey protection. We request you withdraw your colonizers and open diplomatic channels." Velian almost laughed. "Request?" A Tier 3 species made requests. He did not even answer directly. He nodded to his communication officer. "Send the standard Tier 3 pacification protocol. Frequency 7. On the human bridge, Ji-hyun frowned. "They're sending a data packet. It's not a reply. It's a manual. Guidelines for species integration into the mycelium economic framework. They've just sent us a rulebook." Min-soo's jaw tightened. "They're ignoring us." Then, a new warning alarm sounded. Kim Tae-hyun's voice was higher now. "Massive energy buildup in the lead Imperial vessel. It's their central spire. Shields to maximum. All hands brace," Min-soo shouted. Velian watched the human ship scramble. "Pathetic. Fire a warning shot. Use the low-yield particle beam. And wide. Let them see the light show. Let them understand their place." The Imperial weapon fired. A lance of brilliant green energy, so bright it left streaks in the eyes of those who saw it. It was designed to be beautiful and terrifying. It shot across space, meant to pass safely in front of the human armada. But Kim Tae-hyun was staring at his own screen, not the weapon. "Captain, the shot's trajectory, it's passing through that anomalous dust cloud we flagged. The one with the weird radiation." The beam hit the cloud. For a fraction of a second, the green light twisted. It flickered with strange, dark colors. It missed its intended path. It did not pass in front of the human armada. It struck the lead human cruiser, the Courageous, on its port side. There was no explosion of fire. The Imperial beam was too advanced for that. The energy simply dissolved a perfect, clean sphere of the ship. One moment the Courageous was there. The next, a third of it was gone. The remaining pieces broke apart silently, spilling air and bodies into the vacuum. The silence on the bridge of the Unyielding Resolve was absolute. The view screen showed the glittering debris of 500 lives. Min-soo's hands were frozen on the armrests of his chair. Ji-hyun was staring, her tactical mind utterly blank. Kim Tae-hyun looked sick. On the Imperial observation deck, Velian's satisfaction was gone. He leaned forward. "A miscalibration?" he muttered. Subcommander Kale looked at the sensor data. "The cloud. It refracted the beam. It wasn't in our firing solution logs as a refractive body." Velian waved a hand, pushing the error aside. The result was the same. The warning has been delivered. Now they will leave. But on the human screen, Captain Minsu's face returned. His eyes were not full of fear. They were full of a cold, quiet fury. The transmission was only audio. His voice was calm, and that made it more terrible. Mycelium Empire, you have fired upon a Terran vessel. You have killed our people. A pause hung in the air of both ships. The time for requests is over. Minsu turned to his crew. His order was not to attack. It was the only choice he had left. All ships, red alert, hold position, prepare for defensive action. The human armada did not run. Its weapons, small and primitive, powered up. They pointed their metal sticks at the gods. And in the deep space around them, unnoticed by either side, the strange radiation in the dust clouds began to pulse.